Hi, this is Jessica Maes, Infusionsoft Certified Consultant, and today I'm going to show you how to modify data in Infusionsoft. When you log into your Infusionsoft application, you land on your dashboard and go ahead and hover on the Infusionsoft icon. Over here in the admin panel, we have a section called Data Cleanup. Now, the first thing on our Clean Up Your Data list is to modify existing records. I want to back up for a second. I want to show you this area again. On that admin list, there is also import data. And there's often confusion between importing data and modifying data. Here's the big difference. When we go ahead and modify our data, we are making changes to existing contact records in the system. And then when we put the information back into the system through this modifying existing records channel, we do not create new contact records in the system. So if we pull out, let's say, 5 records and we make some modifications, if we put them back in using the steps that I'm going to show you, we do not create 5 new records in Infusionsoft. We instead have done a mass edit to those 5 existing contact records in the system. So it's really important that you know the difference between the two, because if you go ahead and go through the channel of importing data, you will then create 5 new records in addition to the 5 that you pulled out. Okay, so once we get to the spot where we're going to modify existing records, we actually have to have the data ready to go into the system. So let me walk you through all of the steps that you would go through. And let me explain a scenario so that this actually makes sense. You might be wondering why the heck anybody does this anyways. Very often, customers discover that they want to get rid of a field in the system. Now, you can't just get rid of Infusionsoft fields that are in contact records and so forth. However, if you've created a lot of custom fields, you can get rid of those because you created them. You can also get rid of them. Now, what often happens is we can have up to 100 custom fields. So very often, especially if there's more than one person working in the Infusionsoft application, somebody might create a field called, let's say, birthday. And everybody's using the birthday field, and that's great. And a bunch of people in the database have their birthday in that field called birthday. Then someone comes along and they don't realize that there's a field called birthday, and they create a field called date of birth. And now we've got those 2 different fields, and now going forth, everybody's been putting the birthday in the date of birth field. So if we have 1,000 records, let's say now 500 of them have the birthday in one field, 500 of them have the birthday in the other field. That's the perfect example of when you could consider modifying your data so that you can get all of the birthdays into one of the fields or the other one, and then the one that is left empty, doesn't have any information in it, you can then go ahead and delete that field so that you don't have people putting information potentially in 2 different places going forward. Okay, let me show you the steps. So I'm going to look up in my database everybody named Jessica because I know I'll get a fairly small list, and pretty much everybody is me. So what you do as a first step is you find the records that you want to modify. Okay? So I've brought up a list of 4 of my contacts, and from the Actions tab, I can export that information. Now, it's important that you find the exact data that you want to pull out of the system, because that's what you want to work with to modify. And here's something super, super, super important. You have to pull out the ID. Okay? That has to be checkboxed. So you can decide you don't need the names. You just want to see, let's say, company and telephone number. That doesn't really make sense. But I just, for the sake of time, want to grab a couple of fields and pull them out so that you can see this. You can choose whatever data you want to pull out of the system. But when you're doing it because you want to modify records, you must checkmark ID. I'll explain why. When you're putting the info back in, when you're updating the records, this is how Infusionsoft gets the information into the existing records. Otherwise, it will go ahead and create a new one as well. All right, so I've check marked what I want to pull out. I go ahead and start my export. This isn't going to take very long because I don't have a lot of data here and I don't have a lot of fields. So you'll see what happened. I pulled out the information that I want. The ID number, the company name, and the phone number. Now, if, let's say this was telephone number and phone number, what I would want to do is I would want to end up with this column being empty. I'd want all of my data over in the column for the field that I would want to keep. Okay, so I would make my modifications and I would then go ahead and save this as a CSV. Okay, now that's done. And now I've got the data that I want to put into the system. So I've gone ahead and exported. So step one is to first find the list of records that you want to modify. Export that list into a CSV, which is a spreadsheet. Make your modifications on the spreadsheet. Make sure you export the Infusionsoft ID and make sure you do not make any modifications to that column when you're modifying your spreadsheet. You save your spreadsheet and you come back over to Infusionsoft, you go over to Data Cleanup, you choose Modify Existing Records, and then it will walk you through what you need to do. It looks just like the steps for importing. So if you've imported lists before, I know this looks very familiar to you, but notice we're modifying here. I would grab my spreadsheet. Now we know that I created that spreadsheet for demo purposes. I'm not going to really import it at this time. But what we would do is we would go out to my desktop and we would find that you would go wherever you have it saved, I should say. I don't remember where I saved it. All right. I wasn't paying attention and I didn't see where I saved it, but you would grab your CSV and you would put it in here, and then you would continue on clicking through. It will then go ahead. The information would go back into the system in my example, and those 4 records would simply be modified rather than 4 new records being created. So this is really handy. I mean, don't feel like you only would do this if you had a duplicate field that you wanted to get rid of. I run into it a lot when perhaps multiple people have done imports of records, and perhaps the first person that did an import put all of the addresses in the billing address, and then the second person that did imports put it in the shipping address, and the customer then wants they've made the decision that they want the addresses in one area or the other. This is the spot where we can do that in a very efficient way, and we can also make sure that we don't create new records. So these are just examples to kind of make the point of how you might use this modify data area. You're not restricted just to those 2 things that I've just said, but hopefully that gives you some ideas on what we use this area for. But it is really handy, and I do find that customers are not aware that we're able to do this, and they instead will import again and then try to get everything pushed together through duplication, checking for duplicates. So this is a really handy way to modify your existing data in Infusionsoft.